Coming up next on Horsepower Heritage.
Bill Devin went back to the Ferrari factory and hung around there for a few days. And this is where I really believe, in the stories will tell you, he caught the bug of racing. He saw how the cars were put together. He saw how he was treated and said, you know what, I can go back to the States and I can do a better job here. I can manufacture my own cars and I can manufacture a car that can beat Ferrari.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Horsepower Heritage. I'm Maurice Merrick, and greetings to all of you listening from places like Dayton, Ohio, Birmingham, Alabama, Blanchard, Oklahoma, Tokyo, Japan, Calais, France, and West Bromwich, England. Great to have you out there, and as you know, this show is all about the people and the stories behind the machines. So if you like what you're hearing, there's a few easy little things you can do. Hit that follow button for one, and share the show with your friends. That's really important. And by the way, just take a minute or two if you're on Apple Podcasts and jot down a quick review for the show. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy, maybe a sentence or two, but it really helps. And don't forget, if you're listening on Spotify, they've added ratings to that platform now too. So you can give the show 5 stars over there if you think I deserve it. I hope I'm hitting that 5-star mark. All right, well, today we're going back to the golden age of sports cars. In the 1950s, a guy named Bill Devin realized his dream of producing a lightweight sports racing special and taking on the big boys at circuits around the world. And now Devin is making a comeback under new ownership and bringing that pure wind-in-your-hair driving experience to a new generation of enthusiasts. My guest is Kevin Callahan of Devin Sportscars, and that's coming up right after this. Hey everybody, Maurice Merrick here, and I want to tell you what's new at Model Citizen Diecast. First, there's the Porsche 718 Boxster and Cayman in 1/43rd scale. Perfect size for your desktop or your bookshelf. Or how about a Shelby GT350R prototype or a Volvo 850 Turbo Wagon, both in big 1/18th scale. And my listeners get 10% off when you use the code HERITAGE at checkout. Limitations apply. Just go to modelcitizendiecast.com and see what's new. From race cars to street cars and everything in between, it's Model Citizen Diecast. Because your inner child still wants to play with cars. Kevin Callahan from Devin Sportscars. I am so excited to talk to you.
Same. I've been listening to your podcast. You got a really good thing going there. I really, really enjoy it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I like your approach, the history. You really tell a story well. And I really, why most people need a guest on, if I see a podcast and not having a guest on, I usually would jump over that, you know?
Right.
In your case, I started listening to more and more of them, but I love the history that you put out there. And that's not an easy thing to do. You got a lot of editing. You're putting in music. There's a lot there. And I appreciate the effort.
Well, thank you. It's fun. I really enjoy it. And the show's growing, and I have super loyal, diehard fans, which is cool. And Kevin, when I found out what you were doing and that you were breathing new life into Devin Sports Cars, that was really exciting because you really kind of have to be immersed in automotive history to know what a Devin is. Most people who are car fans probably haven't come into contact with one. But when you take your Devin out in public to events, how do people respond?
It comes to mind. I was able to do the Radnor Hunt, and it's for the Northeast here outside of Pennsylvania. It's a very prestigious car show, $1 million cars there. And they have an area outside called the Sports Car Park. And I went to pull in there, and the organizers waved me, and they put me right behind these hay bales there and put the car proudly on display. And I'm looking on the other side of the fence, and there's these $1 million Bugattis there. But I will tell you, more people came up and asked about that car, hung around that car, took pictures of it. It was really exciting for me as I go forward and do my proof of concept in my mind, how well that was received amongst the most elite cars in our area. So that was really exciting. So it's something people hadn't seen before. They loved the story behind it, and they loved the idea about how a guy from Southern California could take it upon himself and make a world-class sports car and have it look that good and be that good, and even in 2020 look that great.
Bill Devin is such an interesting character, and he was kind of one of those right place, right time sort of guys.
We all know the name Shelby and Remington, all those names, but there's a Bill Devin, there's other guys, who contributed a lot of stuff to where we are today. And what an exciting time. Those late 50s in automobile racing. I'd love to go back there and just experience some of that, but it'd be so cool to see it in the day.
Oh, for sure. And those names that you mentioned, that's exactly what I think about. Bill Devin was he was in the same vein as a Frank Curtis or a Carroll Shelby or even a Donald Healy, where he had his own vision. He was doing his own thing. I think we should probably give people a little bit of history of who Bill Devin was. So he was born in 1915 in Oklahoma, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And from an early age, he was into cars because his dad had a garage in Oklahoma. And then later on, they moved west. They came to California during the Dust Bowl, right? So he was around cars since he was a little kid. Where does the story go from there? How did Bill Devin get from an Okie kid to a sports car manufacturer?
He was a machinist in the war. And like so many of these guys who went to war and became machinists or mechanics and stuff, they came out of the war and they were car guys, and they got traits, whether it was banging out a metal shape or fixing a motor or just solving problems. The military was great at doing that for people. So that shaped Bill Devin probably more than his youth.
Yeah, like so many families in the Dust Bowl era, in the Depression, they came west looking for work. And as I understand it, Bill Devin got a job with Douglas Aircraft, which if you had fabrication skills, if you were mechanically minded, thousands of young men went there to work. So by the end of the war, he had ambitions to go racing. He had a small Crosley hotshot racer.
Yes. And he was successful. He won some races. I'm not going to play this out. He was a race car driver, but he got behind the wheel and he caught the bug like so many people did.
It's funny too, because Crosley was America's first subcompact car line. They had station wagons and little sedans, and the Crosley Hotshot, which was a 2-seater, 750cc racer. And they actually did pretty well in their class. Obviously, small displacement. There's quite a limited field in that class, but they did really pretty well.
It was a great entry-level vehicle that somebody could purchase and go racing on the weekend and then drive it home,
And how about his business life? He started some car dealerships, right? Iowa and then Southern California, and did pretty well.
Yeah, he did well. He would start these Chrysler Plymouth dealerships. That's what he seemed to have, and grow them and sell them. And it was that money that gave him the opportunity to go racing, the opportunity to now import cars and get involved in the racing scene. So it was those dealerships that set him up to allow him to follow this dream, which he probably had to make his own car one day.
And immediately he wanted to buy a Ferrari, and he bought a Ferrari that had been driven by Phil Hill in the La Carrera Panamericana. And Phil Hill had crashed the car, and Bill Devin got a hold of it. And the European racing influence kind of, I think, hit him.
It did. He did move on from the hot shots to Panhards. The Panhard he made, that was a real race car. He bought some chassis, and then he needed bodies for them. And what was available at that time? The new miracle product, fiberglass. And Bill Devin started immersing himself into fiberglass. And he built some fiberglass bodies for these Panhards, which he took out racing. And those cars were really, really successful. That was the first car that he manufactured that won a national championship in 56. So Bill Devin always has that tagline that he's been manufacturing championship race cars since 1956 or 1954, I guess is when he started doing it. But that was a very successful car for him. And the people, you could buy that car and you knew you could go out and win your class in it.
Right. And the Devin Panhard, again, is small displacement, right? 750cc. Front wheel drive, right? Basically Panhard underpinnings with Bill's custom Devin body.
And it wasn't just the body. This is where he came up with that overhead cam. He realized he could take this motorcycle motor and put a cylinder head on top of it and connect the crank and the camshaft with a belt. So he was reading an article in, I think it was Business Week as the story goes, and he saw this belt. He reached out to the manufacturer of the belt, and the guy's like, well, you would need a 6-inch belt for that load. And the sales rep evidently came out and they met together and they realized, wow, we can get this done in a 2-inch or 1-inch belt. So he had a body, which was lightweight. He had tweaked the motor to get more horsepower out of it. And guys like Jimmy Orr could go out there and win national championships in that car. So he wasn't just a body maker. He definitely was a tweaker of motors and suspension. He was very single-minded that way. He didn't follow the crowd. People would have ideas and come to him. He had his way of doing things.
When Bill bought the Ferrari 212 that Phil Hill had wrecked in the La Carrera, he bought it from Luigi Chinetti, right? Who was the Ferrari importer for the United States.
Yes. His relationship with Chinetti goes all the way back to the 1953 Le Mans race. Bill, like a lot of people at the time, decided, you know what, it's time for me to go race in Le Mans. So he had ordered a Ferrari from Chinetti. He flew over there with Chinetti, and when he got to monitor, the car was not ready. And then he realized he couldn't race. But it was pretty funny. Mike Hawthorne was over there at the same time, and his car wasn't ready. So the two of them drove to Le Mans, and Chinetti and Tommy Cole was his race partner. They drove the Ferrari that he had ready. During the race, Tommy Cole had died. So Chinetti had stayed back after the race to attend his funeral. Bill Devin went back to the Ferrari factory and hung around there for a few days. And this is where I really believe, in the stories will tell you, he caught the bug of racing. He saw how the cars were put together. He saw how he was treated and said, you know what, I can go back to the States and I can do a better job here. I can manufacture my own cars, and I can manufacture a car that can beat Ferrari. He did purchase a couple of Ferraris while he was at the factory, and he did bring back that Barchetti into the United States, which he was known as a guy who would buy different cars and sell them to people, and that's how he supplemented his racing income. That Barchetta was actually driven again and won some championships here in the United States by Phil Hill himself. So he got back into the car after Bill brought it back here. I think him and Chinetti have an interesting story. They drove one day to look at a MG dealership, and they were thinking about buying one. They're driving back, and they were saying, you know what? I'd rather starve to death selling Ferraris than making a lot of money selling MGs.
The other thing, too, is that by the mid 1950s, the U.S. market is being flooded with sports cars from Europe primarily. So MG, Jaguar, Ferrari, Porsche, and Bill Devin wants a piece of that pie. So he's got big plans.
He does. And what helped him was a letter that came from two Irishmen, Nolan Hill and Malcolm McGregor. And they had actually built a frame with a rear end and suspension over in Ireland. You were mentioned in the time, some of your best race components, they were made in the UK. You want Girlin brakes, you want a certain coil over shock. It was available. It wasn't available here in the United States. So he saw this as an opportunity to get a world-class chassis and put his body onto it. Now, the reason Malcolm and Nolan Hillis had reached out to Bill is they needed a body for their chassis. So Bill flew over to Ireland, and they arranged a test drive, and they basically put a milk crate on the chassis, and they found an old airfield, and Bill took a couple laps in it and said, yeah, I want this chassis. I want to tweak it a little bit, but this is what I want. So an agreement was made between the two Irishmen and Bill Devin that they would import these new chassis to Bill Devin in California. Bill Devin would fit them with bodies and sell them. So that's really jump-started Bill into a real well-handling car. And in addition to that, Bill had access to motors. And the Irish guys did not really. You couldn't go to Jaguar and say, I want 20, 50, 100 motors. We saw this in Ford versus Ferrari. The big guys in Detroit, they could give you motors. So Bill partnered up with GM, and he fitted these Irish chassis with 283 Chevys, and that became the Devin SS, which is probably referred to as his flagship sports car that he made. Very Ferrari looking.
Let's talk a little bit about that chassis design. It wasn't just a conventional ladder frame chassis, was it?
It was ladder and tube, but I think the components were more ahead of its time than anything else. It had four-wheel disc brakes. It had a rear, which had a Dion tube in it, but it also had inboard Girlin disc brakes on it. This is 1958, 57, 59 now. He's got a design that's supporting inboard disc brakes with a Salisbury rear, and he later changed that to a Chevy rear. To put things in perspective, Jaguar did not have that to 1961. Everybody thinks Jaguar has, and a lot of hot rodders use this Jaguar rear. It's got inboard disc brakes. It allows you to pull the wheels in and out. It was connected by a Dion tube. You would have an independent rear suspension, but you would actually now rigidly connect these two hubs, which support the wheel on the outside. So this was a state-of-the-art rear suspension. Tires were so thin in those days. You're running on 6 inches of tread, and it actually helped keep those tires on the ground. Moving on to 60s, we didn't see Dion tubes that much anymore because the tires got bigger, and it was not an issue to keep rubber on the ground. The tires would generally do them themselves. But back in the 50s and early 60s, this was state of the art.
It's always fun to watch them drift through corners and stuff, like at Goodwood. I love the races at Goodwood.
Yeah, it is a show. And I don't know if you own one yourself. I own one, and it's just even fun to ride around town, and you can break them loose on a turn sometimes. It's fun.
Yeah, I've owned older cars that run skinny tires, and you can have a lot more fun at a lower speed. So the Devin SS is, as you say, is kind of the flagship, and he was trying new things all the time. One of them was that you could, if you owned an MG or a Triumph, you could order components from Devin to personalize your sports car, right?
Correct. Yep. So we created this fiberglass body that could be put on sports cars. Guys who got into wrecked their car, they could put this body on there, and it would be a way to fix it, but also cut weight on it. And weight is horsepower. So he designed the body, and then he figured out a way. At first it was 9. He got to 27 different bodies. You could order a body from him in 27 different sizes and buy a fiberglass body that would fit your wheelbase or your project. So this is what he's known for a lot of, making these fiberglass bodies in the 50s for people to put on their car. A lot of people bought them and never even put them on. And I still get calls today from people that said, my father bought this thing. It's been up in the attic. I need 2 doors because somehow we moved 3 times since my father and we lost the doors. So some of those parts are still even available today out of Devin Sportscars, LLC. So you can complete your project. But there's probably around 3,000 bodies that were made during his run for people to put onto cars.
Do we have any idea how many complete running Devins still exist?
I can answer that a couple ways. Now, Bill Devin actually made complete turnkey cars. We hear about the 15 SSs, and he probably made another 30 on top of that. We have Devin Cs, which had Corvair engines. We have Devin Ds that have Porsche, and some of the Devin Ds have VW engines in it. There could be another 100 of those that were made. So we have 2 things. He made bodies and he made complete cars.
So then into the 1960s, Bill Devin's got plans for a coupe body, right?
Yes. It was called the Devin GT. He decided he would make a coupe car, make that for production. He set out to make 2 models. One was completed by the 1964 New York Auto Show. And he showed it in the New York Auto Show. He got orders for it immediately. It's pretty interesting. When I bought all the Devin assets and some molds and jigs, I got all the correspondence. And I got correspondence from people saying, I want to buy 100 of these. I want to buy 50 of these. So we had orders for him, but he did not have the backing or the financing to go into production of it. And that model is kind of stillborn and never made it into production. The second car has been completed, and it was on the grass of the Quail one year. Very attractive car. Looks like a lot like a Datsun 240Z, I would say. So he was really ahead of his time in the styling and what he was doing there.
By the late 1960s, though, it was getting hard on sports car manufacturers, and Bill Devin was no exception.
Yeah, even, we think back on the car looks beautiful to us, but it was probably outdated by, 65, a 1959 car or 58 car. So he did suffer a bit of that. And I think designers do today even. A company can design a car that looks like an angry insect, and somebody has a more angry insect designed 3 years later when his is ready to go into production, So I think he suffered a bit from that too. There's the design and the concept had become long in the tooth, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, even by the late 60s, Ferrari was sort of on the ropes. They had to sell to Fiat in order to survive. So for a very low production manufacturer like Bill Devin, it must have been enormously difficult. What became of Devin Enterprises in those years?
Bill Devin, probably around that 65, was no longer involved in producing cars, but he kept his jigs, he kept his molds. He was supporting the hobbyists too. If somebody needed something, he would sell you a part here, a part there. But he basically was out of the business. He had to actually start working, doing other things at the time. Bill Devin passed in 2000. And 4 gentlemen who were Devin enthusiasts stepped up and approached the widow and bought the assets, the intellectual properties, the molds, the jigs from Bill Devin's widow. And it should never be underestimated what these guys did to preserve Bill Devin's legacy. So I never want that forgotten as I move forward with it. If they had not stepped up and purchased this and stored it, and thank God it's California storing it, things store well out there, I would never be able to go out and load up containers and bring it back and try to bring this back to life.
Yeah. And so how do you come into this story? You're in Pennsylvania, I understand.
Yes.
Outside of Philadelphia. I take it you were familiar with Devin Sportscars even when you were a kid.
Not really.
No?
I wasn't. And it's funny. I said at work one day, I'm like, wow, I don't know why I really like these cars. And somebody said, because you grew up watching Speed Racer, Kevin. That's why you like them. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right, Paul. That's why I like them. But my introduction with Devin was, I think like a lot of your listeners, I do my work at night and everybody goes to bed and I do my half hour on eBay. So one night I'm searching. I see in the background this guy's picture, this white car. So I quickly email him and say, what's that white car in the background? And he goes, that's a Devin. So then I Google search Devin and this picture comes up on my screen. I still remember it today. Is blue Devin going around a corner and there's a green DB1 Aston Martin right on its heels. And they kind of look the same. I'm like, wow, yeah, I'm really interested in that car. As I moved on and I want another project, retirement thing I want to do, I would like to build one of those. And that was my first introduction to Devin. Who would have thought it would have led to buying the whole company years later? But that's where I'm at today.
And was that just a case of, well, I need these parts and those parts, and pretty soon you decide, well, I might as well just buy it lock, stock, and barrel?
Didn't happen exactly like that. I started buying some parts here and there. I started making friends with different people on the internet. And somebody once called me and said, hey, the guys who bought Devin, some of them are not amongst us anymore. Some of them taken ill. And there could be an opportunity for you to purchase if you're interested. So I started following up on that lead. And that lead led to me to this, the son of one of the owners. And like any car story, I kept in touch with them at holidays. We'd email each other back and forth. It was interesting. One of the turning points was one time I'm emailing Jeff, it was his name. And he goes, yeah, I'm cleaning out all my dad's stuff. And he goes, can you believe he has his erector set from when he was a kid? I said, erector set? I went down and I had my dad's erector set when he was a kid. So I took a picture of it. I sent it to Jeff. I go, like this one, Jeff? And he goes, oh my God, it's the same one. So I think it's like in sales. I developed a relationship. I think the people knew I'd be the good guy to be the caretaker of Devin going forward. I flew out there to California and we met. We looked at the stuff and we came up with an agreement. And my 2 sons, they jumped into it too. So the 3 of us flew out to LA. We loaded the molds and jigs and all this stuff into containers and did some surfing, hung out in LA for a few days, one of the better weeks of my life, and came back here. And I said, look, wife, I got all car parts this time, not just a car. So that went over well.
I'm sure it did. How long did you have to stay out of the house until you were allowed back in?
She was great about it. And I don't know what was harder. I tell people asking my wife to marry her or tell her I want to buy this car company this time, which is all parts and not a car. But she was kind of cool. She was like, is this what you want to do? I'll support you. So she's been great that way.
What other cars are you into, by the way, Kevin?
It's funny. People say you're one of those guys. I've been always into Corvettes and always wanted a Corvette. And I was always wrenching on things from lawnmowers to my parents' cars in the driveway and everything. So I saved up all my paper route money, caddying money, and I bought a Corvette when I was in high school. And I still have that 69 Corvette today.
That's terrific. Let's see, 69. Is that an LT1?
No, it's got the 350 motor in it.
Okay.
350 horsepower, but it's a convertible, and it's the first car I ever had. And I still take it out at every homecoming, and I drive around the homecoming parade, hopefully with my kids and the kids I know. And it's a lot of fun.
They're beautiful cars. I love that Stingray styling. So if somebody's interested in either restoring an existing Devin or purchasing an entirely new production Devin, how does one go about that?
We have a facility over here outside of Philadelphia building parts and pieces for the Devin population. So they can contact me or go to the website. Do you need a door or hood? And as we go on, we hopefully will be offering a body and a frame that somebody can actually put together a Devin in a DIY situation.
And there were a wide variety of Devins available back in the day, but you're focusing on the Devin SS, right?
Originally, it was funny. That was my main focus, but I've gotten so many requests on the Devin C and Devin D. Now, the Devin D was a car that Bill Devin developed that was almost like a Porsche Speedster. Had a Porsche motor in it, Porsche suspension and everything. And they are just great cars. They love them to race vintage racing in them. And there's a big population of people out there who have those cars who need parts, but people want to actually build them. The Devin C came about after Porsche stopped Bill Devin's supply of Porsche motors. And we'll leave it at that. Porsche had an industrial motor, which was interesting even to me at the time, that you could go to a dealership and buy a Porsche motor. And those motors were actually used for farmers, for well pumps out in the field, for carnival amusement rides and things like that. And that was the intent of these Porsche motors. Bill Devin had a back door where he was buying these industrial quote unquote motors and putting them into the cars. When Porsche found out about that, he cut off his supply of Porsche motors. But the timing was perfect because GM had just introduced the Corvair, and Bill saw an opportunity using the engine, the rear engine Corvair motor in his car. And he started making these Devin Cs that were very, very successful on the racetrack, drag strips, and everything else.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, all the different configurations you could get a Devin in, whether it's front engine, rear mid-engine. The driving characteristics would have been quite different from car to car based on, weight distribution and all of that. But there's so many cool choices. I think it's probably the one option at that point that has more choices than any other if you want a custom sports car.
It would. And you wonder if some of his influence, he was right down the road from Myers-Manx, the dune buggy guy. And you could tell by the influence on both cars, by the bucket seat area that was fiberglass into these cars. They were the only ones doing that at the time. And it added a surprising amount of rigidity to that structure. You could pick up a lot of fiberglass bodies and they kind of flex and twist and things like that. But the Devin or dune buggy with the molded seat area in the middle almost comes like a unibody construction and very, very rigid. So maybe some of the influence came from there.
So Kevin, right now, you're not building full cars, but you are providing parts support. I understand you have an interesting development program, and out of that will come complete cars in the future.
Yeah, and one of the more exciting ones we're doing right now is we're working with a couple of guys in England right now, and we're hopefully preparing a car for the Goodwood Revival this fall. What better test for a car is to go racing?
So as part of your development program, you always have to keep in mind that you want to be period correct.
Yeah, we want this to be a continuation car. Since I do have the original frame jigs, I have the original patterns that go out to the Amish guys and they cast them in sand and aluminum or cast iron. This car is going to have a certain DNA that you're not going to see in a lot of other cars that people can build that emulate a car from the period. It will have the true racing DNA, the soul of Bill Devin in it. So in doing that, and we're going to try to follow the FIA and get FIA approval for this car, we have to be period correct. It has to be things that were done in the time. So the development, not just in the body, on how the rear goes together, how the front suspension goes together with an eye on racing. Options might come in the models. We have the SS, we have the Devin C, the Devin D. You could have an a la carte way you could purchase these. Maybe you just want a body and you don't want the frame. Maybe you want to put this body on a frame that you have, where you want to stay period correct, or you want to go with a larger motor. So we hope to have some proof of concept things built here shortly, and we're going to see where it takes us.
That's terrific. And the cars are going to be road legal. They're not just going to be for racing.
They will have all the things you need, and it'll probably be up to your state to determine what is needed in lights and everything. But these were road cars too. That's the way they were built back in the day. You would drive to the racetrack and drive and come home. So yeah, they have blinkers, they have headlights, they have all the things you need. No radio though, but yeah.
You don't need one.
No, listen to the engine, right? Bill Devin's cars, the DNA was based on a race car. And that's why he built cars. So what better way to honor the design of the Irish chassis and Bill Devin's, but to put a car back in Goodwood and let it run with the big boys. And hopefully we'll have some success out there. I'm very excited about this, and it really forces us to build a car, not just for looks, but a car that's going to be able to race and race hard.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of interest in Devins in Europe, and they had a great race record, as we mentioned before.
I think it was interesting that you had Danilo on your show from Paco.
Yes.
It was interesting. He has reached out to me, and we've become friends over the internet. And he shared with me a story I didn't even know, that in Costa Rica, where he's from, they were a Devin manufacturer for Bill Devin. And he sent me a newspaper article. It talked about the president of Costa Rica driving the first Devin off the assembly line, and how Costa Rica was going to now be this manufacturer of this world-class sports car. I think it does lend to Bill Devin how he wasn't just in the United States. His cars were sold all over the world. I get calls from Germany all the time, Argentina, Mexico. These cars were sold all over the world, and people would buy them and build them in their backyards or whatever it was, or have them ship complete cars. So I think that's a credit to how well he was received, just not in Southern California, but around the world.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And by the way, when a Devin pops up on Bring a Trailer, people get really excited.
I love Bring a Trailer for that reason, that a lot of history is kept on Bring a Trailer. So anyone interested in a Devin, go to Bring a Trailer. You can see what has come through there, what it's sold. All different types of Devins have gone through there and what they're selling for.
Well, listen, my friend, it's really a pleasure to have had you on, and I wish you all the success in the world. And I'm sincere when I say it is very exciting to see what you're doing, because there's not a lot of people in the world that are bringing back something from the golden age of sports car racing, and you're doing it. If people want to get in touch, they can go to Devin Sportscars LLC.com. That's your website. I'm going to put links in the show notes. And on Instagram, you're at Devin Sportscars, right?
Yeah, and follow us on Instagram. People always ask me, can you keep me up to date on your progress, Kevin? And I said, yeah, just follow me on Instagram. I can take pictures of what we're working on the shop. I throw them up there all the time. It really is for our car community. And I met so many people, have traded ideas back and forth through Instagram, and listen to car podcasts like this. And it's amazing how much information's out there and being conveyed back and forth between people, and allowing me to do what I'm doing today, because people share with me stories about Bill Devin or how he put together this thing, or I've been able to figure out what this jig was by talking to somebody and showing them a picture. So guys, jump on that Instagram, jump on the Facebook page, and you can see what we're up to.
Well, Kevin, thanks for coming on the show. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I can't wait to see what's next.
I really like what you're doing. I love the history you put out there. And it was a lot of fun today.
That's all for this episode of Horsepower Heritage. If you like what you've heard, support the show over at buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage and throw a few bucks in the gas tank. I'll see you back here on Wednesday, March 9th, when we'll be talking V-twin motorcycles and flat track dirt racing. And let me tell you, if you want an in-your-face racing experience and you want to see guts and glory, Flat Trackers deliver. And it's got a great legacy at the roots of American motorcycling. So until then, I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for listening.